All right, 5 big tight end questions into 2024. Let's start with you, Lawrence. As Matthew discussed with Andy Reid at the Combine, there is this idea that Travis Kelce is going to be on not necessarily a pitch count, but just lowered snaps naturally as he gets older. Is that a concern for you, or do you think that just with the amount of times he's going to get targeted with his touchdown equity, that he is still clearly the number one tight end in fantasy?
And by the way, Lawrence, I just want to ask you, I have another question to add on to Jay. Did you notice what Jay just did there? Because I have to tell you, that's the way you name drop. I know you tried to give yourself, some cred with mentioning Drew Brees, but what I did is I had Jay mention that I talked to Andy Reid at the Combine. That way, I don't look like I'm trying to hype myself up. I have somebody else do it, Lawrence, and that's the pro way to do it.
But see, we now we got 3 name drops because you got Doug Peterson. I had.
Is that really a name drop though? Come on.
I mean, hey, it's levels to this. It's definitely levels to this. So you got
Peterson out here taking shrapnel. Yeah.
You got Andy Reid and Drew Brees, and then you got Doug Peterson, Super Bowl.
We love Doug Peterson here,
champion coach, by the way. But we love the name dropping. And
anyway, Jay, you were talking about my exclusive interview with Andy Reid that I had at the Combine. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's fairly even with Drew Brees, definitely. And speaking of Travis Kelce, I don't think it's a concern, Jay. I think it's fine because you want Travis Kelce on the field when it counts. He's still, especially now with the Hollywood Brown injury, Travis Kelce's gonna matter even more. It will be a situation though where we won't see Travis Kelce blowing the field away. I see Matthew has him as his tight end 2. He's my tight end 3. Last season, 4 other tight ends finished within 1 point per game in fantasy to Travis Kelce last season. So you can see the gap kind of closing. He'll still give you those top tier numbers. He's still going to be close to touching 1,000 yards and up towards 100 catches. So it's nothing crazy. It's just that the younger guys is starting to catch up now.
To me, that's the big point there, right? Is Travis Kelce still going to be awesome this year? Because even if he plays less snaps, the snaps that he does play are going to be high leverage snaps. They're not throwing him out there to block, right? I mean, he's going to be in the red zone. He's still going to be a target for Patrick Mahomes. We'll still see Taylor Swift in a bunch of games. He'll still want to get touchdowns for Taylor, all of that. I think Lawrence's point is absolutely right, that the big reason why you drafted Kelce in the first round last year was because not only was he elite, but he was so much better than every other player at the position. He was significantly better. He was giving you a 4 to 5 point, if not more, advantage every single week at a tough position. But now, once Hawkinson comes back, but I have Sam Laporta as my number 1 tight end. I think you could, if a year from now we're talking about Trey McBride as the number 1 tight end in fantasy, I don't think that's going to shock anyone. I don't think Mark Andrews as the number 1 tight end in fantasy would shock anyone as well. Evan Ingram put together a really nice year there. There's a couple other guys that are also sort of in the mix. And again, once Hawkinson comes back on a point per game basis, he could be right there. So just, I have Kelce at tight end too, but that's the difference there is just he's an elite tight end, but he's not in a class by himself anymore. There's now a number of guys that are right there in that tier with Kelce.
Yep. Lawrence Scoe finished tight end 11 last year, though did really pick it up after a slow first 6 weeks as Dalton Kincaid. Do you think there's a chance that he could be Buffalo's leading receiver this season?
Yeah, there's definitely a chance, and especially after watching him run with the Bills' first offense, which they did start out in 12 personnel. So Dawson Knox was also on the field, so take note of that. But you like to see him, Dalton Kincaid, that is lining up in line. That goes to show you that they're willing to put him anywhere alongside the line, not just as some big slot receiver out there. He does have a chance, especially when you have 3 receivers in Samuel, Shakir, and Keon Coleman. None of them have to this point, separated as as a top tier receiver in the league. So being that Dawson Knox has had success in the past with Josh Allen, and Dawson Knox has been fantasy relevant, I believe Dalton Kincaid and his skill set, he's getting drafted at about the right spot, I would say.
Yeah, I am pro Dalton Kincaid. So 75% route participation. Again, Josh Allen played only 8 snaps, right? 8 snaps, 4 dropbacks, 75% route participation. I mean, it's all insanely small sample size here. But I think what's encouraging here, without Stephon Diggs and without Gabe Davis, there are 241 targets up for grabs. And yes, the numbers with and I pointed this out on 100 Facts, the numbers with the Dalton Kincaid numbers with Dawson Knox on the field are much lower than when Dawson Knox was out. And obviously Dawson Knox is now healthy. But having said that, they like Knox as in the red zone, but they like him more as a blocker. I think Dalton Kincaid is a special player. We talked about this with Connor Rogers last year, that he thought coming out of the draft last year that Dalton Kincaid had the best hands of anyone, not the best hands of a tight end, the best hands of anyone coming out of the draft last season. He is basically a receiver that qualifies at tight end here as well. 54 slot targets last year. That was the 3rd most among any tight end. And again, he didn't really start getting to play more until Dawson Knox had that first injury. So I think sort of sky's the limit for him. With 241 targets, you're going to see some Khalil Shakir. You're going to see some Curtis Samuel. We talked about Keon Coleman as well. But ultimately, I think at the tight end position, he's my tight end 5. I think Kincaid's going to have a really big year. I'm not worried about Dawson Knox all that much. Yeah, as it relates to eating into Dalton Kincaid's production, it's going to be a high octane offense. He's playing with one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. Proud fantasy life investor Josh Allen.
Okay, very good to get that one in.
Yeah.
I think
name drop.
The other thing too with Kincaid is that, and I believe he spoke to us a little bit about this on Radio Row at the Super Bowl, is there just has to be a steeper learning curve playing with Josh Allen and getting used to Allen's tendencies, how he creates in chaos. There just has to be a steeper curve there than like learning to play tight end with like Derek Carr or something, just because. And we saw that there was a few balls that came off of Kincaid's hands from Allen, where Allen just, he throws these frozen ropes at 500 miles an hour. And I think year 2 that Kincaid should have a little bit more of a rapport with Allen. Speaking of year 2 of something, or in this case, maybe year 3, going to run this question back again, Matthew. Are we finally going to see the Kyle Pitts breakout in 2024?
I think so. I think so. Since Kirk Cousins became a starter, we saw this in Washington, we saw this in Minnesota, and I believe we'll see this in Atlanta. Kirk Cousins is top 5 in the NFL in terms of targets and completions to tight ends. Then you also think about all right, Kirk Cousins dropped backs to pass. Who's he throwing to? Right? You've got Drake London, you've got Bijan Robinson out of the backfield. That's about it till you get to Kyle Pitts. And, it's unfortunate. I don't mean to but we haven't really talked about this, but, Rondell Moore suffered an injury. He is done for the year, unfortunately. So that is somebody the Falcons were counting on this year as well. So no Rondell Moore. And so you'll have Darnell Mooney there. But I don't know. I think just Kyle Pitts is such a talented player and such a mismatch that they will be able to use him, that Kirk Cousins likes the tight end as well. And so, I'll Kyle Pitts is tight end 9. So I'm kind of back. I'm back in on him as a low end tight end 1, and certainly it wouldn't surprise me if he bested those numbers. Like, we're expecting this to be a very good fantasy friendly, high octane offense under Zach Robinson in Atlanta with Kirk Cousins under center. Lawrence, your thoughts?
I didn't hear it when you was mentioning those tight ends earlier. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if Trey McBride finishes tight end 1 or Mark Andrews. What about Kyle Pitts here?
What about Kyle Pitts?
I think the biggest problem he's had in these 3 years, well, there's 2. It's the touchdowns. And we saw a lot of low touchdown numbers with Julio Jones back in his playing days, right? Kyle Pitts has 6 in 44 games. That's one problem. People forget, though, as a rookie, he had 1,000 yards receiving, but 1 touchdown. That 1,000 yards receiving was with Matt Ryan. So here's where the other problem comes in. His quarterbacks after Matt Ryan: Marcus Mariota, the great Desmond Ridder, and Taylor Heineke were his quarterbacks after Matt Ryan. So now you get Kirk Cousins in there, who is the best quarterback he'll be working with since Matt Ryan. And like you said, Matthew, who they going to throw the ball to? We kind of got to see what the offense is going to run like. We saw it with Michael Penix the other day. And if it's run like that, then I don't see how Kyle Pitts doesn't eat this season.
No, I agree with that. Again, it feels like year 4 now of Pitts being maybe the highest variance tight end to draft. Another guy I think is somewhat high variance just because of how pronounced his splits were with Deshaun Watson versus Joe Flacco is David Njoku, who quietly ended the season from week 7 onwards last year as tight end 2, but basically all of that production, all of the really meaningful production came with Flacco at quarterback. Matthew, he's going around tight end 8 at the moment. Do you think that he's being overlooked in drafts?
I don't think he's being overlooked. He's my tight end 10, so he's actually going higher than I have him ranked here. To your point, in 11 career games with Deshaun Watson, he's averaging 8.8 fantasy points per game. His 5 games with Flacco last year, he averaged 18.2. So, this really, really stark. Listen, here's the positives of Njoku. He doesn't come off the field. He's one of the best similar to like Rob Gronkowski. Like, what's underrated about Njoku is how unbelievably good he is as a blocker. So he is not like kind of one of these move tight ends that just sort of is only in there for pass plays and doesn't really block that much. Njoku's like an unbelievable blocker, and so he's on the field on every single snap basically, and that when plays break down, so he's there and then he can release and go out for a pass. So that's exciting, and obviously I think he really kind of had a breakout last year in terms of showing his pass catching ability. He was so good down the stretch, and I don't think if you didn't have him on your team, you probably didn't realize it. Everyone was making such a big deal about Flacco's run, which, Jay, I don't know if you're aware of this, but Joe Flacco won Comeback Player of the Year.
Is that right?
A lot of people thought Damar Hamlin was going to do it. Lawrence, I have a friend that put like literally 6 figures of bets on Damar Hamlin. I don't want to mention his name, but a massive amount of money. You could buy a house with.
Don't introduce
on
me
Damar
to that
Hamlin
guy.
winning, and Joe Flacco is the guy who ended up winning Comeback Player of the Year.
Unbelievable.
So a lot of people were talking about Flacco, but maybe not Njoku. But to answer your question about Njoku, we haven't seen Deshaun Watson be the Houston version of Deshaun Watson, and we just don't know if that guy is still in there. So the negatives of Njoku, I think the talent is there, and I think he sort of proved himself and the playing time is going to be there. The concern is the numbers so far with Watson aren't great. He's competing with targets not just with Amari Cooper, but they acquired Jerry Jeudy this offseason, so now you've got Jerry Jeudy in the mix. I know they want to get Elijah Moore more involved. They saw him trying to force feed him the ball last year. Cedric Tillman, me and Connor Rogers, we both love Cedric Tillman. He's having a very strong camp. So there's some mouths to feed there. So again, I'm a tight end 10. The positives are he also led all tight ends last year in end zone targets. He's a nice big target in the end zone, which they don't really have in terms of red zone threat. So as with every question with Cleveland, it comes down to which Deshaun Watson do we get this year? We're just not sure yet. So I think it's about right. I think he's a low end tight end 1, but I think Njoku is a guy, Lawrence, that has a higher variance than most tight ends going in that range, because if you told me Njoku finished as tight end 3, I'd be like, I get it, because he's that physical a beast, and like he's so good and so good in the red zone, and in theory Watson could be a good quarterback. Like we saw it for 5 games last year. He was unbelievable. Yeah. But if you told me Njoku finished as tight end 15, I also would believe it, because Watson's been bad with him, and we haven't seen the Deshaun Watson we've expected to date in Cleveland.
Yeah, not only his him being well in the red zone, but his run after the catch is pretty good too. And I just think it's like hard to see that, right? And then come into the next season, regardless of who's at quarterback, and say, oh, we got to worry about getting Jeudy, this amount of touches or something like that. Like David Njoku has to be that second guy after Amari Cooper. After this, sometimes you just got to get your top guys to damn football.
Yeah. Just thinking about it now, Matthew, because I kind of zoned out for the past 45 seconds after you said Joe Flacco's name. If Deshaun Watson wins Comeback Player of the Year this year, the year after Damar Hamlin lost, I'll give the game away. I'll have nothing left. It'll just absolutely break me. It feels like it might be coming. People are going to talk themselves into the Deshaun Watson comeback story if he's awesome this year. It's like, what's he actually coming back from? Anyway, last question as part of the tight end slate. Matthew, will Brock Bowers see enough targets to be a difference maker?
I don't think so. difference, like I'm a tight end 12, so I don't have him ranked as a difference maker. I don't think he will. I don't think he will. After Antonio Pierce took over last year, right, week 9 on, the Raiders were 22nd in pass rate. They were a bottom 10 offense in terms of pass rate. And so nothing they've done this offseason that makes me think they want to change how they're built. I understand they drafted Brock Bowers, and you're sort of like, but like everything Antonio Pierce has sort of said and done this season is they want to run the ball. Like to your point, Lawrence, in terms of get your best players the ball, they have Devontae Adams, they have Jacoby Myers, and so I'm sure Bowers will have some nice moments. I'm sure Bowers will, he's a super talented guy, but your question is, will he see enough volume to be a difference maker? And I don't think he will this year. I'm just concerned about, again, him and Mayer were out there. They're going to run a lot of 2 tight end sets, as we talked about earlier in the show, but just this is not a team that, like Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew, like how confident do you feel that those guys, this is going to be a wide open offense? Like if you're Antonio Pierce and you're looking at the roster as currently constructed, and by the way, and think about what they did last year down the stretch where they turned it around and it got Antonio Pierce the job full time. Like you want to run the hell out of the ball and play good defense.
Yeah.
Like you're in the end, you're not gonna outsling like, I guess Herbert, the Chargers are going to be an offense, but like, I just don't think you're going to like gunsling your way out of Denver and the Chargers and certainly not the Chiefs. Like the way you're going to compete in that division is like grinding it out, playing ugly football. I mean, tell me if you disagree with that, but that's my take.
Well, that is how they last beat the Chiefs because they're the last team to actually beat the Chiefs. I will say this though, Matthew, I'm a little more bullish, as they say. I saw him line up out wide. I saw him line up in the slot, saw him line up in line. He had 2 catches for 25 yards on that first drive alone, and then he was gone. So they do want to run the ball, the Raiders do, but you have to be winning to keep on running the ball. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, this is true.
Then you got Luke Getsy. It's not a great number, but it's not a bad one. 2 seasons offensive coordinator as the Bears. The tight ends ranked 9th in targets at that time. That's what made Cole Kmet fantasy relevant, made him a tight end 1. So to see Brock Bowers in that type of range wouldn't be shocking. And when it comes to getting your best players the ball, I think he'll fall comfortably in second behind Devontae Adams.
Maybe, but Lawrence, the question was, is he going to see enough volume to be a difference maker? Where do you have him ranked?
7.
Oh, wow. Okay. So you are definitely more bullish than I am. Because do I think he sees enough volume to be a borderline tight end 1? Sure. Do I think he sees enough volume to be a difference maker, to be a guy like what Laporta did or Dalton Kincaid did as rookies or as Trey McBride did in his second year, like these young tight end breakouts? I don't. That's where I'm at.
That'll be tough. Those guys were amongst the top tight ends, and Laporta had you get 10 touchdowns, 900 yards. So for Brock Bowers, if he's getting 50, 60 catches, 700 yards, 6-7 touchdowns, that'll put him right inside that tight end 1 range. It's definitely going to be some weeks where I will be like, damn, why I take him as my top tight end. But then he might have some weeks where I'm like, see, guys, I told you. I'll be on Twitter. I told y'all, man. It's 1 game. So it'll be some up and downs. Yeah.
Just real quickly, because you mentioned Cole Kmet, because you were talking about Luke Getsy, who, former Bears offense coordinator who's now with the Raiders. One thing I didn't mention when we talked about Caleb Williams, that's the other thing that I thought was really interesting about the Bears preseason game. Cole Kmet and Gerald Everett both had a 63% route participation. And I don't know that, starters didn't play that much, so maybe Everett got more playing time than he normally would. But to me, the big takeaway is that Cole Kmet is being overdrafted. Like you look at ADP and Cole Kmet's being drafted as sort of a borderline tight end 1. He's going in that tight end 12-ish range. And again, with DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, Rome Odunze, he was already going to be challenged on targets. And now the fact that Everett, who has history with Shane Waldron, wherever Shane Waldron goes, seems like Gerald Everett shows up. I think Everett's going to play more than anyone's expecting, and I'm not saying that I think Everett is going to be a fantasy option, but I do think he's going to play enough that it's going to hurt Cole Kmet, who is more volume-based. I mean, you think he's talented, but like his fantasy value was tied to volume, and I don't think the volume's going to be there for Cole Kmet. So just, if you're wondering who's going to be on the hate list this year, like,
definitely not somebody I would say to target in that situation. No. As we might have to come up with a new term like tight end by committee. I see it as being something of that nature.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.